Let's explore the 7 best alternatives to punishing or disciplining a child. Now, many parents resort to punishing their kids in an effort to make bad behavior less attractive or to help their kids understand that certain actions will not be tolerated. Unfortunately, punishments do not work to resolve the underlying issue. Rather than helping kids feel sorry for their actions or helping them think about how to make amends for what they have done, punishments cause them to feel resentful. So instead of facing up to their misbehavior, they end up becoming preoccupied with revenge fantasies or thinking about how to avoid getting caught in the future. Now, just to be clear, children should face the natural consequences of their behavior, but they should not face arbitrary punishments. The more that we can help them recognize the impacts of their actions, the more they can learn to make better choices. So let's go over the 7 best alternatives to punishing a child as covered in the popular parenting book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Mazlish. Number 1. Point out how they can be helpful. Children like to be helpful when given the opportunity, and so one of the very best things that we can do to help them avoid misbehaving is to proactively provide them with something positive to do, something useful that they can contribute. So for example, if we're in the grocery store in a situation where typically they might start to misbehave, what we can do is we can give them a task to help with the shopping process. For example, we can have them help load things into the shopping cart, or if they're too heavy, we can load the things into the cart, but we can have them practice their numbers by reading out the prices of the items that we're loading into the cart. The idea here is to look for some way for children to contribute to what is happening so that their excess energy can be directed towards something positive rather than allowing them to direct that energy towards misbehaving. Number 2, express disapproval without attacking them. It's hard for a child to do the right thing when our words feel like a personal attack. So while it is important that we express strong disapproval for their bad behaviors, it's important that we use language that doesn't feel personal. So for example, if a child borrows your saw and fails to return it, rather than saying, "You ruined my new saw by leaving it out to rust in the rain," you might say, "I'm frustrated and upset that my new saw was left outside to rust." The key here is to direct your frustration towards the behavior or the outcome rather than at the child. And this is very powerful because it provides them with an opportunity to understand the consequences of their actions and how those actions made you feel without putting them on the defensive. Number 3, state your expectations clearly. We often assume that children know exactly what we expect of them, but it's very important to note that pointing out misbehavior isn't the same thing as explaining how we want them to behave in the future or how we want their behavior to change. So it's very important that we clarify our expectations. So in the case of the borrowed saw, after expressing strong disapproval for their behavior, you might say, "I expect when my tools are borrowed that they will be returned promptly and in good condition." Number 4, show them how to make amends. Along with expressing disapproval for a child's misbehavior, it's also important that we provide them with an opportunity to set things right. That way, after their initial remorse, they have the opportunity to once again feel like a respected and responsible member of the family. So in the case of the borrowed saw that became rusty, what we can do is instead of offering them an arbitrary punishment, we can provide them with the oil and the steel wool needed. So if they put in the time and energy, they can fix the rusty saw, they can remove the rust and remedy the situation. And of course, this is another excellent way for them to be able to experience the natural consequences of their actions rather than just facing an arbitrary punishment. Number 5, offer them a choice. Let's say a child is running around a grocery store, making a scene and misbehaving. Well, instead of immediately punishing them, what we can do is we can offer them a choice by saying, "You can walk calmly next to the cart, or you can sit in the cart seat. Which do you prefer?" Likewise, if a child borrows your tools without returning them, you can offer them the choice between borrowing your tools and always returning them or giving up the privilege altogether, which brings us to tip number 6, take action. If a child continues to misbehave after you've expressed disapproval, set clear expectations, or even offered a choice, it's time to take action. And once again, the goal here is to help them experience the natural consequences of their actions. For example, if a child continues to run around the grocery store after you gave them the choice of either walking calmly next to the cart or sitting in the cart seat, you might say, "I see you've decided to sit in the cart seat." Likewise, if a child continues to borrow your tools without returning them, then it's time to put a lock on the toolbox. Now, crucially, this step is not about lecturing or moralizing. It's not about making them feel bad. Instead, the goal here is to simply help them experience the natural consequences of their misbehavior. Number 7, problem solve. When an issue occurs repeatedly, it's usually safe to assume that the issue is more complex than it may have first appeared. So when that happens, it's important to engage in problem solving with your child. So let's explore the 5 problem solving steps as outlined in How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Mazlish. Step number 1, talk about the child's feelings and needs. It's very important that we don't rush this step. The goal here is to get a deeper understanding of how they are viewing the specific issue that you're trying to resolve. And of course, the more that we focus on understanding their perspective, the more likely it is that they will focus on understanding our perspective in the very next step. Step number 2, talk about your feelings and needs. Keep this part very short and clear because it can be very difficult for a child to listen to a parent who goes on and on about things like worry, anger, or resentment. So share your perspective, but keep it short and concise. Step number 3, brainstorm together to find a mutually agreeable solution. Let the child come up with the first few ideas and avoid rejecting or evaluating their ideas. Sometimes they will be practical, sometimes they will not. In some cases, you may be impressed by the creativity of their solutions, but they may only share some of their more creative solutions if you avoid rejecting some of their initial suggestions. Step number 4, write down all of the ideas on paper. By making a complete list of all of the suggestions, we make it clear that we're taking all of their ideas seriously. And this step also creates a natural opportunity for them to review and consider your own suggestions more completely. Step number 5, review the list with your child. Decide which suggestions you like, which you don't, and which you plan to follow through on. And once again, avoid rejecting or criticizing any of the ideas. Instead, you can share your reaction to them by saying things like, "I wouldn't be comfortable with that because blank," or "that sounds like something I could do." Now, in the case of the missing tools, you might start this entire process by first asking, "What can we work out so that you can use my tools when you need them and so that I can be sure they will be there when I need them?" Then work through the process to devise a solution that works for both you and your child. Now, each of the strategies that we've covered here can be used individually or in combination with some of the other strategies. But in either case, the overarching goal is to address misbehavior by allowing children to experience the natural consequences of their actions. Of course, it's also important to praise children for their positive behaviors. So I've published a video that covers 4 practical tips for how to praise a child with words. It's a natural follow-up to the ideas covered in this video, so I encourage you to check it out. You can find a link to it right here in the video player, as well as down in the video description text.